a continuation, but it is another aspect of that message. Do we have an issue?
It didn't have audio at first, now we do.
Okay. So, everybody, welcome if you didn't hear the welcome before. And I want us to go ahead and start with the text that we started with last week. So, I am going to read it, Mark 21. And when Yeshua had crossed again in the boat to the other side, a great crowd gathered about him, and he was beside the sea. Then came one of the rulers of the synagogues, Jairus by name, if you look at the Greek name, and seeing him, he fell at his feet and implored him earnestly, saying, "My little daughter is at the point of death. Come and lay your hands on her so that she may be made well and live." And he went with them. And a great crowd followed him and thronged about him. And there was a woman who had a discharge of blood for 12 years, and who suffered much under many physicians, and had spent all that she had, and was no better, but rather grew worse. But she heard the reports about Yeshua, and came up behind him in the crowd, and touched his garment. For she said, "If I touch even his garments, I will be made well." And immediately the flow of blood dried up, and she felt in her body that she was healed of her disease. And Yeshua, perceiving in himself that power had gone out from him, immediately turned about in the crowd and said, "Who touched my garments?" And his disciples said to him, "Do you see the crowd pressing around you, and yet you say, 'Who touched me?'" And he looked around to see who had done it. But the woman, knowing what had happened to her, came in fear and trembling, and fell down before him, and told him the whole truth. And he said to her, "Daughter, your faith has made you well. Go in peace and be healed of your disease." While he was still speaking, there came from the ruler's house some who said, "Your daughter is dead. Why trouble the teacher any further?" But overhearing what they said, Yeshua said to the ruler of the synagogue, "Do not fear, only believe." Jairus, you just experienced, this is who he's talking to. And he allowed no one to follow him except Peter and James and John, the brother of James. They came to the house of the ruler of the synagogue, and Yeshua saw a commotion, people weeping and wailing loudly. And when he entered, he said to them, "Why are you making a commotion and weeping? The child's not dead, but sleeping." And they laughed at him. But he put them all aside and took the child's father and mother and those who were with him, and went in where the child was. Taking her by the hand, he said to her, "Talitha kumi," which means, "Little girl, I say to you, arise." And immediately the girl got up and began walking, for she was 12 years of age. And they were immediately overcome with amazement. And he strictly charged them that no one should know this, and told them to give her something to eat. Now, we know that story. We've known it since, a lot of us, since we were kids. But there's so much more to the story. And I've even had more revelation on it in the last couple hours. And it's just amazing to see the pictures come together. And I want us to go, just as a reminder, you see Jairus, he comes in and they tell him, "Hey, your girl's dead." And is that not what happens to you? Does the enemy not send bad reports along the way to stop you from doing what you're doing? He does. We need to remember that voice when it comes along, what the source is. And it can be your brother or your sister, so to speak, but the source can still be the enemy. It's those that think they know everything, that maybe say, "Give me, give me, give me, teach me, teach me, teach me, show me, show me, show me," but they don't walk in the Spirit. They only know a form of godliness, and they never come to the power and the revelation of who Yeshua really is, and that his word is alive, and that he is the same yesterday, today, and forever. Instead, they're just walking around with a lot of knowledge. Well, I say to you, that knowledge is that tree of knowledge. So they're walking beside the tree of knowledge, making sure they know everything, telling everybody how much they know, but they do not know of whom they speak intimately. They don't know that he is the resurrection, which we spoke of last week. And he is. So remember, when the naysayers come along, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. And then also, remember, when you're working for a miracle and you're expecting a miracle, don't just let everybody come around. Don't let anybody know what's going on, just everybody. Be particular. Because he's going to work where he's welcome, and his power is going to move where he's welcome, and for those of like kind and like mind. Anyway, as I was praying over things and studying out, you really see how both of these stories are so intertwined together. For a reason and a purpose, I dare say. And what we see here is a picture of the restoration of Israel in both of these ladies, the girl and the woman. And I'm just going to briefly run through some high points, and then we're going to dig a little deeper. Because just as you were studying today, there's an unfaithful bride, and the unfaithful bride has become unclean. All right? So this is the spiritual status of the bride is reflected in these stories. The spiritual status of the unclean bride. And I'm not talking just about girls. I'm talking about the bride of Messiah. Our spiritual status. What have we let creep in? Because, see, Yeshua is gathering the exiles. And this is a picture of what's happening as he gathers the exiles in. The Brit Hadashah teaches us that the role of Messiah is to gather the exiles. But it even goes in a deeper way. And we see this woman represents the nation of Israel in exile. And what do the 12 years represent? They can represent so much, but in part they're representing those 12 tribes. Now, what's wrong with this woman? She's in an unclean state. Why? She's done her own thing, her own way. She's been an adulterous bride following other gods. So she has this issue of blood. The spiritual status of Israel for breaking the covenant is that they are unclean. That we are unclean. Ezekiel 36:17 says, Son of man, the house of Israel, which dwells in their land, has defiled it with their own ways and their own works. Their way was before me as the uncleanness of a ministrating woman dwelt in their own land. They defiled it by their own way and by their doings. See, blood, death, makes you unclean. And this is an issue of blood. So that's what this is all about. It's an issue about being unclean. That's the spiritual status of the bride. And we are to make ourselves ready. But I see in this story that there's something about the reuniting of a family that we may never have even thought about before. Because we understand that the spiritual condition of the exiles has been, they've been lost. Israel is lost. I mean, Pastor John was just speaking of the conditions that we see in the land of Israel, for those who call themselves Judah. They're an adulterous bride. In fact, the word says, but Judah, you have been much worse than Israel. So they are unclean. And we understand that nothing heals. Nothing. Man's medicine can only go so far. Do you guys agree with that?
Yep.
It only goes so far. A lot of times it covers up the problem. It doesn't take care of the root, which means you're still sick. Even the blood of bulls and goats, what did it do? It covered. It didn't exchange. And we need an exchange. And as I was looking through this, I started thinking a little bit about the lady with the issue of blood and how she is Israel. She is the exiles of Israel. And that possibly, maybe the girl represents Yehuda. What do I mean? She's dead. She's still in the house, but she's dead. She died. Because we see beside this man he's sandwiched between two unclean people. One that's dead and one that's been adulterous. Who does that sound like? But who is the one that brings both together? And let's say that this household did happen to be what some have said, that it is one home. That we're speaking of a mom that's had an issue of blood for 12 years that mothered this girl. Not saying, just like I did last week, I'm not saying that that's the way it is. I'm saying that there's a lot of talk out there that this is one home. And this home has been divided and separated for 12 years. there's been no more children. Remember, it was his only daughter. Maybe there wasn't even sons. This was the only child because the mother in the home was now gone. The mother who builds the house brings forth life. And there's something about the unification there. Blood loss. Think about blood loss in and of itself. Physically, it makes you weak and frail and anemic and overwhelmed and fragile. Maybe that also speaks of you spiritually. Heartbreak and unforgiveness and bitterness and infirmity and sin and exhaustion and despair all come because we have an issue of blood. We have an issue of blood. Hebrews 12:24 says, and to Yeshua, the mediator of the new covenant, and to the sprinkled blood, which speaks better than the blood of Abel. The blood of Messiah Yeshua. Is that the blood that cries out, that voice we hear? Or do we still hear the voice of Abel's blood crying out? Where is our hearing connected, and who are we connected to? Because remember, are we still that bride that's bleeding, that's unclean? Are we going to be part of reuniting the house? Sprinkling, if you look at the Hebrew, it's G4473. It's rontismos, and it's talked about a ceremonial sprinkling dealing with the red heifer ashes. But it's also rendering of this time of nidah, which is the time of separation for women. And you've got to remember, this cycle, this officially 7-day cycle, also, isn't that amazing? 7 days, it still sort of falls 7,000 years, 7 days, 7, 7, 7. Yah keeps, man, that's his number, isn't it? And there's a reason and a purpose because it's all connected. See, the woman hasn't sinned because she is in this time of separation. That's not what it's about. In fact, she's at a time of separation from her husband. She's at a time of separation from everything so that she can draw more intimately with her Creator, the King of Kings and Yah of Yahs. But here we have this lady. She's bleeding. And it's been going on and on and on and on, and it's made her unclean. Just as Israel has been bleeding and in this condition which only Messiah can change. Guys, only Messiah can do it. We can't fix ourselves up, and we can dust ourselves off and try to make ourselves pretty, but what's underneath is still the same thing. And it can be pretty ugly. And here's the deal. We walk in our way. We want to do it our way. We want to have it our way. We have this and this. We've cleaned ourselves up in some areas. But some areas of our life, it's still our pet thing. It's still that thing that we want to hold on to. We are not ready to give up. And what we do is we just leave this trail of blood everywhere we go. We leave it. We don't even think twice about it because we think because we've cleaned up a few areas of our life, we're all good. We're just going to hold on to our pet sin. But this separation time, this time when we draw close to Yah as the bride, where we become intimate with our King, with our Master. This time of nidah, where that's connected to the sprinkling of the blood of the red heifer. See, in the woman herself, in her menstrual cycle, her cycle that she has, Yah is showing forth this plan of redemption for us as his bride. In the woman herself. And it's far beyond the normal way of thinking. He's showing us something far more intimate. Now, when we look at Leviticus 12:7, when it's talking about the blood flow. All right, okay? It's talking about this uncleanness. And then we jump over to Malachi 4:2, which says, "But to you who fear my name, the Son of Righteousness shall rise with healing in his wings, and you shall go out and leap for joy like calves from the stall." See, we need to be he has healing in his wings, but we don't take hold of it. We forget that that same word that's used for healing or salvation is the same word he uses for healing. We have this mindset that salvation is one thing, that we're in the process of being saved. Yes, I know, it's sort of different than that concept we had in the church, maybe. But it's the same word, Savior, that is used for our healing and our deliverance. We know, how many of you know that you will be with Yeshua in quote unquote heaven, in here, as heaven comes to earth, etc., etc. Okay, it's not even a question. We don't even think twice about it. But when it comes to healing or deliverance or something else that's needed, we don't think of it the same way. Am I honest here? We think maybe the word says I'm healed by his stripes, but we don't have it in our knower. We're still hoping and we're not believing. We're still hoping and not believing that he's going to do something. But that's not the way we're supposed to think about it. That's not what we're supposed to do. Because see, the healing of this woman with the issue of blood, when she stood in faith and she went before Messiah Yeshua, when she goes before him and she reaches for him in the crowd and touches the hem of his garment, there's something that happens. Because there was a dunamis power that came forth from Yeshua, a power that was beyond anything that he knew, that not he knew, but that you can find in the natural world. And there's something that happened because she was taking a hold of healing for the generations that had gone before her. Many of you know that sometimes you suffer for things you didn't even do. People said, people did, maybe even your own family, your friends, those you thought cared, and now you suffer the price because of something they've done. And when we reach hold and we say, in the name of Yeshua, I have been healed, there's something that happens in that DNA of our very core that changes. It is now restored to whole, and that means the generations that go before us can be made whole as well. Because that's what his healing power does. That those little marks on our DNA that have gotten there because of sins of our fathers and our grandfathers and et cetera, all the way back to the beginning, that have left marks and have caused us to gear one way, to suffer physically or other areas of our life through oppression. Whatever, the healing of our Messiah, his supernatural power comes upon us and we are changed, and all that is wiped away. The dunamis power of our King. So the woman with the issue of blood was taking a hold of healing for her and for the generations before her and that would come after her. Abba wants us to come to him. He wants us to understand that he is the healer, not just by our words, but to have it in the very core of our being. To have it in the very core of our being. I thought it was really interesting in the verses of Leviticus 20, verses 26 and 27. There is actually a connection there. It is an equidistance lettering in this scripture. I'm going to read it to you. It says, "And you shall be set apart to me, for I, Yehovah, am set apart and have separated you from the peoples to be mine. And a man or woman in whom there is a medium or a spiritist shall certainly be put to death. They are to stone them with stones. Their blood is upon them." Now, what's really interesting, when you look at the equidistance of the lettering, here's what it says in those verses. It spells out the blood of Yeshua.
Oh,
See, it's about the blood.
yes.
The living blood of our Messiah.
Sandy, where was that scripture again?
Leviticus 26 and 27.
Thank you.
Chapter 20. Chapter 20, verses 26 and 27. The blood of Yeshua. See, the blood of Yeshua can break the back of anything that's taken place in your life. That's why we're to be set apart and take hold of his blood. And the bloods of bulls and goats can't do that. It can't do it. For he is the light and he is our redemption. This woman was rejected by everybody. Nobody could help her. She was ostracized. She was pushed aside, probably made fun of, demonized in a way, pointed at, left with nothing. And what's interesting is that when you look at her, the word for woman here is gune, and that's G1096. But what's interesting, when you look at the definition of this, it means that she's not just a woman, that she's a wife. She's a wife to somebody. Where is he? She seems to be alone. She's dealing with things of her own. If she happens to be Yair, or Jairus' wife, he's set her out or something, and because she's unclean, and she's alone, and he's alone. If she's not, and she's attached to someone else, the bottom line is she's gone through society in brokenness and hurt, in desperation, weakness, you name it. She's had to deal with it and is dealing with it, but still her faith stood strong.
Yes.
Still her faith stood strong. Didn't matter that if she was rejected by society. It doesn't matter if you're rejected by society.
That's right.
It's hard. Hurts your feelings a lot. Hurts mine. I want people to like me, but it's not about that, is it?
Nope.
It's about being pleasing to our King. And if the world loves us, then we're probably that adulterous bride in all likelihood that's leaving a trail of blood wherever she goes. That's not walking in faith. But the word woman, meaning wife, I think it's very interesting. And when you break it down even more, when you break it down a little bit further, the root of the Greek is genomehi, and it means to cause something to be or to become. So it also has this hint in there that she's to become something. See, Yah is making within you and I a new creation.
That's right.
We're on our way
Yes.
if we're willing to sit on the potter's wheel. We're on our way if we're willing to separate ourselves. We're on our way. And see, a woman in herself is supposed to serve as this bridge in the home. She's supposed to be a bridge between the spiritual and the natural. We've talked about that. When the woman's out of the home is awry. When the man's not in the home is messed up. You need the whole family together for things to be right and in order. We need our bride. We as the bride need to be with our bridegroom. We need the bridegroom in our lives. We need that living word in our lives so that we can bring forth children healthy and strong. And I'm not just talking physical children. I'm talking spiritual children. I'm talking about the word being made life. I'm talking about the waves of his greatness, of his supernatural power being reverberated in our lives and being felt through our society, so that our society is literally shifted and changed because of the atmosphere that we create, that we don't create, but that we make, that he creates through us when we walk into and out of a place.
Amen.
That power of Yah. We, as the bride of Messiah, are to be the bridge between the natural and the supernatural. But so often, many who claim to be the bride, that have even gone back to their roots, there's a lot of natural going on, and there's a lot of teaching going on, but there is not any supernatural going on.
Come on.
How can we be a bridge when we push that aside and we say, this much is enough for me? I'm telling you now, I want everything there is. I want everything there is of our Messiah, of Yeshua. I want his word alive in my life, and I want to walk in his power and in his glory wherever I do. But first, I need to make sure that I am not walking around as the unclean woman, bleeding everywhere, leading and bleeding, and doing my things my way.
Come on.
If you're a leader and a bleeder, you're just leading people astray. But we have a lot of leading leaders around.
Yeah.
There's no bridge there. Or if there is, it's a false bridge, and it leads to destruction. It leads to destruction. From the beginning, Yah has had a plan for us. He's had a plan for man to dwell with him in unity. But she could not dwell with her bridegroom, wherever he is and whomever he might be, because of the blood flow. When we look at flow, it's interesting. It means, it's number G4506. I'm trying to figure out how to say this. Roses. We'll try that. Anyway, and it means a flux of blood, an issue or menstrual flow. A flux of blood. The bride is bleeding. How many of you believe that Yeshua and the price he paid on the cross was the ultimate sacrifice for all sin, healing, deliverance, and everything we need? I believe that. What if we look at it this way? As the woman represents Israel and Israel's old way, the old sacrificial system, and I'm not talking about all of the sacrifices. You know that in the millennium it says there'll be some sacrifices, but the sacrifices for sin, on purpose, or sin of itself, those are over because he was the ultimate sacrifice. What if it would mean that flow of blood stopped when Messiah came? The flow of the blood on the altar for our sin, deliberate and accidental, stopped when Messiah came and died for us. I think that's very significant because he was the ultimate sacrifice for our sin. Now, if you're listening and you're saying, well, Ezekiel says the sacrifices will continue. There's going to be sacrifices for praise. There's going to be sacrifices for things like that. But when it comes for salvation and sin and things like that, he came on scene and the blood stopped. Just like in the woman, he came on the scene, she touched him, and the blood stopped flowing.
Yep.
12 years. Are we still bleeding? Do we have bleeding messages and bleeding pulpits and bleeding veils and tzitzits because we're still following our own way and we're mixing it together with his way? You know it's true. You know it's an issue. She had 12 years of bleeding and nobody would help her, but Messiah came on the scene and she was healed. See, she had to get past those that rejected her. She had to push through. Do you think she made an effort? Do you think it was just like, oh, there he is, and here I go. She walks on over and says, and gets down and touches his hip. No, she had to push through the rejection and the crowds that thronged about him. She had to work to get there, but she knew it was just a touch. Just a touch is all it would take. And the bleeding would cease, and she would be healed and made whole, and the generations would continue, and her house would begin to grow and be built again, her home, because she had the faith to touch him. It didn't matter what the labels were. It didn't matter what any of her past, who tried to do what. What mattered now was the testimony that she had. Look what Yeshua did for me. See, when he heals us, we don't have to keep holding on and feeling sad and sorry for ourselves and our story and the whole thing we went through. What we do is we use that to proclaim his name and say, this was going on, but look what happened because I stood and I had faith. I didn't turn the corner just to miss what he was about to do in my life. Instead, I stood and I stood uprightly on my knees. Whatever it took, I stood. I didn't give ground away because I believe that Messiah is my healer just as much as I believe that he is my Savior. See, there's only one. There is only one that can handle it. There's only one that can do it. There is only one. The word says that she spent everything she had. When you look at that word, prosanalisco, say that 5 times fast. That's G4314 and G355. And it means to expend further, to eat or consume. See, this woman, she spent everything she had because the woman's life was consumed with trying to attain healing. What is your life consumed with? Are you needing healing in your body? Is it finances? Is it your job? Is it sorrow? Is it death? Is it yourself? You're consumed with yourself. What are our lives so consumed with that it robs us of real life and we're living in a shadow of what Yah has called us to be? Thinking we're fine. The whole point of that you're deceived means you don't know you're deceived. But we're a shadow of what we should be because we're consumed as the adulterous bride and bleeding along the way. This woman was consumed, but no longer. See, she touched the hem of his garment. She touched the tzitzits. She touched them, and she was healed. Touched is haptomehi, and it's G681. And what's really interesting, it means to attach oneself or fasten or set fire to. When we touch or have a touch or an encounter with Yeshua, there should be a blaze that set a fire within us that can't be contained, that literally spreads. Yeah, we're healed, delivered, set free, made whole. Everything is as it should be because shalom comes upon us because we have joined our shekel with his half shekel. That's another message that we've talked about. And we've been set on fire. We've been set on fire. See, she attached herself with faith and she trusted him. She dialogued maybe within herself, if I could only, if I could only, if I could only. And she did whatever it took to get where she needed to go because she needed the touch of Yeshua. She needed the touch of Jesus. She needed life within her because life and more abundantly is what he provides. So she did what she had to do. She physically touched him. She physically touched him. She touched the eternal Kohen Haggadol's priestly robe. It's amazing. The faith touch of the woman made an exchange. Her blood for his. Where there was death, there was now life. She touched the life. She touched the life, and it changed her. The woman touched the robes of Yeshua, and her blood dried up. Who touched me? See, there was something that happened in that touch. The transfer was made. A transfer was made, and it was a dunamis, explosive power that came out of him. And I believe that the touch moved beyond the physical because don't you know, there were a lot who touched him. But that touch penetrated his innermost being and he felt the power move forth from him. That touch was different. She was so hungry and so thirsty for the truth. And she walked in such faith because remember it said your faith has healed you. He didn't say I healed you. He did, but you know what I'm talking about. He said your faith has healed her. Everybody was touching him. But something happened that went into his very being and pierced hers as well. That touch. Past the flesh, past the nefesh, into the spirit. See, our belief in him should move us past the physical, and it move us right into the spiritual realm. It's got to be both places, guys. We've got to move and go into the supernatural. Faith reached beyond the corridors of what the norm was. Her faith literally shook and electrified. Something happened. And it reached into the very most inner being of Yeshua. And it manifested in her life because of her faith. Because she knew that she knew that she knew that he is the healer. All she had to do was touch him. And that dunamis power, that creative power, it pulled from him. Who touched me? That's what he's saying. Who grabbed hold of faith? And who is the one that connected with spirit and believed and took a hold of the power of the Almighty Yah? Are we willing to take a hold of the power of Yah? How? Because we chase him down. We seek after him. We do whatever it takes to take part in what he's already purchased through the cross.
Yes.
He hadn't even been to the cross yet. To the stake. We have that in our rearview mirror. It's happened. We have the testimony of all those who have gone before us that need deliverance and income and finances and homes and restored homes and health and healing. It's all right there for us to take hold of. Will we walk in faith? See, he didn't say who pulled my robe. He knew the outer garment represented his kingdom power as a Melchizedek. And that power is what touched her. He reconciled her. This woman of faith went straight to the throne. She went straight to the place where El Shaddai was. She went to the seat of authority and took hold of her healing. After 12 years, it's time that we go out with outstretched arms and we reach and praise. We worship, whatever it takes. We get in his word, we declare it, we proclaim it, we work the word, we live it out. Whatever it takes, we do with outstretched arms, with an open hand, to take hold of what he has for us. Because our point of contact is Yeshua. He is our intercessor. He is the high priest. See, faith or belief can move the anointing of the Kohen Hagadol, the high priest, the Melchizedek, who sits at the right arm of Elohim, of Yah.
Good, yes.
But the blood of bulls and goats, and what faith does it take to offer those up and think that we're delivered and set free through that and saved, forgiven of our sin? Only one holds the power to dry up the blood flow, and that's Yeshua. Only one. Only one. So maybe this story is about you and I. Maybe it's about us and our brother, because we're still the bride. It's the bride. We all want to be joined to our Messiah, and our Messiah is Yeshua. It is Jesus, known by some. Maybe there's part of this story that is about a reunification of a family. At the very least, the woman with the issue of blood is Ephraim, is the 10 tribes. And the daughter who's dead in the house, because Judah's in the house, is our brother Judah. But when Yeshua comes and that supernatural power hits, life is breathed back into the home. And they become one, because he came so that the two sticks would become one. He came so that the two sticks would become one, to stop the blood flow, because his blood was the ultimate blood. He came so that he could be with his bride now It's the bride. The bride must go after her Messiah. He's already paid the price. He's already done it. When will we chase after him? And when will we believe? When will we believe what he says and then act it out? When will we not worry about what others think or what others do or about our time or anything else, but we have revival in our very homes, or when we're walking through the store, or going down the street, or when we meet our brother, or when we meet our sister, when we meet our friends, that there's a revival that happens because the anointing is upon you, because the issue of blood is stopped in your life, because you are now clean and you can be joined with your Messiah, your bridegroom, who stopped the flow, because there's power walking and working in you and through you, because you are part of his body. You're one. What we saw today, we saw this family, we saw this body ministering to body. That is what it's about. When we pray for healing, or when we just sing his praise, healing can come.
That's right.
When we say his name, the enemy must flee.
That's right.
There's not a formula that we go through, but we know we just pour ourselves out and we let him do his thing. But we have to have a great expectation that the supernatural is flowing in this house, and that supernatural flow will come forth and it will draw people from everywhere. Why? It's not because of who Yeshua is in us.
Come on.
The woman with the issue of blood, the daughter who's raised from the dead. One story, or at least two that are very intertwined. The 12 tribes, 12 years, one home, one Messiah. Let us hear, all who hear this message, let us live so out loud that explosive power of Yah, that dunamis power, flows through us, not for our glory, but for his. That's a good word, synergize. Let us become one in full, and let us walk in expectation. I want to see when you walk in this house, whether it's for a woman's meeting or Torah talk, or to pray, or to just talk or fellowship, I want to see you come in such an expectation that every need will be met, all the blood will be dried up, that Yah supernatural power is going to be in this house. In fact, we get so excited, we tell other people about it. They come and we don't go, oh my goodness, is Pastor John going to pray? Is Eddie going to pray? What if it doesn't work? Get over it. It's not us who's the healer. It's not us who's the deliverer. It is Yeshua HaMashiach who works through us. And he says he's enthroned in our praises. So let's get our praise on. And let's begin to see the supernatural power of God move in us. Not only in this house, but like such a fire that we joined ourselves to, that it goes beyond those doors and it catches everything on fire. Let's burn for him like never before.
Yes.
That is the commission of his bride. We have been healed, delivered, set free, saved. We have been made whole. Now let's live like it. Let's live with a smile on our face, declaring things that are not as though they are, proclaiming what he says and not what we think. Let's live it out loud, and let's see the environment around us change, and we'll see a full house, a house so full that it's capacity, and we'll have to be bigger. Why? Because we're not just talking about it. We're living it so loudly that everybody wants to come see. They want to look, they want to taste, they want to touch, and they want to see.
Yes.
That is who we are to be. That in itself is how we bring the bride back home. Folks, that's how we come back home, to be with our bridegroom. Let's live it out loud. Let us not look back. Let's walk in expectation, because we're burning on fire with him. Hallelujah.